Big spoilers for Elbath ahead. However, I got a very interesting comment from a member of my Discord, the Digital Burrow, Will of Dreams or Will of Fire, because they mentioned, do you think Nika and the war deity of Elbath were partners or co-leaders slash captains of the Galila, which were the band of giants who were all shipwrights, right? That Zebek was trying to find. Now, I think that's a possibility. I'm not going to shoot that down because I think that's a very likely possibility. But the thing I did want to talk about today, piggybacking off of that idea, is that I do think the Nika user and the Nidhogg user have always found each other throughout history and end up being members of the same organization. Nika most likely always as the leader, where the Nidhogg user is either the co-captain or somewhere very close within the cabinet of the Nika users organization. So with that being said, the reason why I think this is because I do think that the Nika fruit user and the Nidhogg user share a relationship in which both of them are a part of the same pantheon, or are a part of the same mythos in One Piece. Because a very interesting thing does happen in chapter 1174 that does make me think that the Nidhogg is supposed to precede Nika, which is kind of odd because at no point in One Piece before this have we ever had two mythical Zoans linked together in any meaningful way, as if there was lore preceding the Devil Fruits, and then having a union of the users of these two different Devil Fruits is supposed to mean something. We've never had anything like that before, because Jarl says, on an exceedingly rare day when lightning and snow combined, a vast beast will blanket the sky with its presence, and with the sound of the drums of the liberation will appear the sun deity. So it's really weird that two mythical Zoans are joined at the hip here, and the coming of one means the succession of the other, and we've never had that. So I find that very, very fascinating. Another thing that's kind of weird about this is that way later in chapter 1178, Emu, when they perform Damu Reversi on Luffy and Loki, there seems to be a emphasis on making the two hate each other. So that must mean the union of the Nidhogg and Nika has to mean something. It has to be more dangerous than we know right now. Because why was that little rule tacked on when Emu tried to possess Luffy and Loki? That just seems kind of weird. It really does. And of course, it doesn't work, most likely because of their individual Devil Fruits, or it could be a little something to do with Loki's natural physiology and being an ancient giant. I don't know. We did do a video about that a while ago, so we did call that Loki would be immune to Emu. That's a thing. But in talking about Loki's physiology, I think it's very funny that Luffy first awakens and he fights another horned man in Kaido who has a draconic fruit in the fish fruit model Azure Dragon. And yet here we are here with another horned man in Loki who has a genuine dragon fruit in the dragon fruit mythical model Nidhogg. But unlike Kaido, something very funny happens with Loki and Luffy, because in the very early parts of chapter 1174, when Luffy saves the various giants and their children from falling off of the harbor, right? Luffy stretches out and uses Gum Gum Tummy Cracker, in which he fans out to catch all of the children and their giant parents, right? But what's so weird about this is that he wouldn't need to do this normally, because as you know, Luffy has the power to turn anyone he touches into rubber while using Gear 5th. But quite interestingly, Loki, in his Nidhogg state, never turns into rubber. He never does. At no point does he ever turn to rubber. Even when the drums of liberation are affecting the land and the land starts to sway and bow with the thunder snow going on, Loki doesn't become rubber. And Luffy spends a considerable amount of time atop Loki's head as a Nidhogg dragon, and it never happens. And we know that Luffy doesn't have to put any amount of effort into turning someone into rubber when he's in Gear 5th, because it's an area of effect ability. Thanks to the drums of liberation, all it requires is a simple touch or his presence, and Luffy's right atop Loki's head, and that is not happening. So that really does make you think that, wow, why is that? I think Loki might be immune to the drums of liberation in that way, so he cannot be rubberized by Luffy. That could be a shot in the dark. I don't know. But based on all the times that we've seen them together transformed, that seems to be the case. So, while Luffy is immune to the lightning of the Nidhogg itself is immune to the rubberization abilities of Nika. At least that's what I'm coming to as a conclusion. In addition, I do wonder if this duet is actually a trio, because it seems like the Ratatasker fruit eaten by the hammer known as Ragnir always seems to be in the mix with these two, because it's quite odd how chummy all three of them became so quickly. I'm not sure, but seeing as how in Norse mythology Ratatasker is related to the Nidhogg, I could see a small modification happening in One Piece in which the human fruit mythical model Nika, the Ratatasker fruit, and the dragon fruit mythical model Nidhogg are all supposed to be together in the same group, or they all find each other throughout history, because we know too that out of all Doa fruits, Zoan fruits seems to have a will of their own. So I could see that over the course of history, these three fruits have always found a way to find one another and have always found a way to be a part of the same group more or less throughout history. At least that's what I'm thinking. But with that being said, if you are enjoying the video so far, click the like button. And if you want to see more from me, hit the subscribe button, followed by that bell so you never miss a video. In addition, please hit the hype button because it really does help. And with that being said too, give me your thoughts and tell your friends about Polypede Waxu.